How many iconic menswear items can you name that started out as military equipment? Drop them in the comments now and then compare them to our list. The trench coat. During World War I, soldiers lived in awful environments and needed something they could wear for extended periods of time to help repel water, dirt, and general grime in the trenches. Makers like Burberry rose to the occasion and came up with a multi-purpose military coat that soldiers could use for protection and general comfort while forced to live in these encampments. It was so effective that the trench coat was what they literally lived, ate, and slept in. And it repelled the elements so well to the point that soldiers continued wearing it after the war. Add in the fact that they were widely available in surplus stores after World War I, and their continued adoption by the broader public made the trench coat the iconic piece of outerwear we know it is today, with Hollywood only cementing its place in history by prominently featuring it in Casablanca, when worn by World War I veteran Humphrey Bogart. To this day, trench coats and many of the items we're going to mention include features and accessories that haven't quite left the battlefield behind. Once Raphael was wearing his trench coat in the GG office, and Teresa asked him, "What are those rings for?" Raphael nonchalantly replied, "For holding grenades." In fact, there's a disagreement about whether trench coat D-rings were used for this purpose, but it's still a great story. Next up, the Pea Coat. Originally popular in British Navy after being adopted from the Dutch, mainly because they were extremely warm and easy to move around in when compared to the knee or ankle length greatcoats seen in other branches of the military. In fact, petty officers were expected to climb up ropes, swab decks while wearing them. We wouldn't recommend trying that yourself though. Given that the coat had a great combination of practicality and stylish features, Pea Coats soon gained traction with offerings at military surplus stores and became beloved by civilians who appreciated their overcoat-like style while being just short enough to be worn more casually, leading to it becoming the business casual staple piece of outerwear it's known as today. Field jackets had uses in World War I and World War II, and had a popular offshoot with the older models more resembling the safari bush jacket as we know them today. Although, despite having crossover with military styles, the safari jacket is better known today for being used in hunting excursions and recreational trips. Still, the iconic M65 model of field jacket is what gained popularity in the Korean and Vietnam conflicts and allowed the jacket to truly become its own thing. The M65 was an extremely practical garment that had excess pockets and built-in features like a hood, and was designed to be like a modern version of the trench coat during the winter months of military campaigns, where soldiers would live in these jackets and continue wearing them even after they returned from war. The jacket was even worn ironically by protesters and icons of the counterculture revolution like John Lennon and Bob Dylan as a way to show opposition to the Vietnam conflict, making regular citizens later adopt them more as a fashion statement than their original use. Nowadays, the jacket's style and material will vary, from its original rugged and coarse exterior to extremely refined. Even makers like Loro Piana make high-end versions of this jacket now, like the Win-Made Traveler model, which works surprisingly well when combined with elements of fine tailoring. Aviator bomber jacket. Leather jackets were favored by pilots in World War I and World War II, with the B3 model being one of the most iconic. Before enclosed cockpits were invented, it was extremely cold while flying in the open air, making the experience a literal icebox. And even after enclosure, they didn't have climate control, and it gets chilly at 25,000 feet. Pilots began to favor the B3 leather jacket made with shirling, which helped to provide enough warmth and insulation to the wearer without losing any critical range of motion. Even as cockpits improved, it became popular for pilots to have their own signature leather jacket for tradition's sake. Look no further than Top Gun to see that idea in action. Given the prestige and cool factor that comes from being a fighter jet pilot, civilians soon wanted to mimic these styles, and the jacket evolved into what we know as the bomber style today. For more on bomber and flight jackets, we've got you covered with a separate video. Chinos. Chino cloth is a twill fabric woven from cotton, and was intended to be breathable, hard-wearing fabric for the British military when running campaigns in Africa, India, or other desert or tropical environments, with the iconic khaki color serving as a type of early camouflage as if someone blended in the sand dunes or other dusty landscapes. They're so associated with the British Army that Boers refer to British soldiers as the khakis, a long way away from the office and prep environments we're used to seeing them in nowadays.
What are you wearing, Jake from State Farm?
Khakis.
Chino fabric was adopted into other military offshoots, such as Gurkha trousers, after being adopted by the feared Gurkha soldiers of the India subcontinent. But we've already made an entire video on that subject too. Speaking about chinos, I actually have a pair of them on today. Let's go over my outfit. In today's video, I am wearing a linen shirt. It is extremely hot outside. It is in a light blue color. And then, as I mentioned before, I am wearing a pair of khakis. And I am wearing a pair of white sneakers from Common Projects. For accessories, I am wearing my Seiko 5 watch with a steel band. I am also wearing 2 silver necklaces. To harmonize with the blue on my shirt, my fragrance today is blue suede shoes from Roberto Ugolini. For this fragrance and others for the Roberto Ugolini collection, as well as classic menswear accessories, check out our Fort Belvedere shop here. T-shirts. Next, let's move from outerwear to underwear with t-shirts. But the military even made wearing a t-shirt as an outer garment a thing. We first started seeing t-shirts being adopted as a part of a military uniform in World War I by the US Navy, and other branches followed suit. T-shirts were explicitly undergarments, required to be worn under uniform shirts. But going into the 1930s and 1940s, uniform requirements were relaxed and soldiers were allowed to just wear their t-shirts around camp and base under certain circumstances. Some soldiers continued the practice once they returned home, and would even add graphics to the front of them to help distinguish them as an intentional outerwear choice. Their rough and tumble associations fit perfectly with Marlon Brando's character in A Streetcar Named Desire, and the t-shirt soon became a symbol of rebellion and nonconformity, eventually leading to one standard issue uniform becoming the current super casual default style for many civilians. Next, let's turn to footwear. You may have heard of a type of shoe similar to a derby called a Blucher, with a one-cut vamp made from a single piece of leather. Turns out the name is a reference to Napoleonic era Prussian Field Marshal Gebhard von Blucher, who commissioned the shoe to assist his soldiers when marching for long periods in the field. The open lace system meant the leather did not have to be worn so tightly around the ankle, and allowed for a more comfortable and functional experience in general. Soon the other European nations began to copy the innovation, and the lacing system around the vamp is still seen as the preferred method of use for casual and business casual shoes. Let's keep marching with footwear. The Wellington boot started out as a variation on the older Hessian boot, and was first introduced by the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, who wanted a practical and water-resistant boot for his soldiers. The style was later adopted by farmers and other English workers who needed to trudge around in muddy environments. It was also popularized by the hero of Waterloo as a fashionable civilian garb, without which Billy Connolly would be in hospital or infirmary.
You'd be in a hospital or infirmary.
And soon was even imported and assimilated in the US, contributing to the refinement of the cowboy boot. To this day, Wellingtons remain a popular rain boot, lovingly called Wellies, and we've done a video on them as well. Desert boots. Meanwhile, the desert boot was a variation of the athletic chukka boot, which was adopted from the Indian subcontinent into footwear associated with the sport of polo. It allowed for mobility while still helping keep dirt away from getting underneath your pants. Unique desert boot varieties similar to chukka boots were worn by various armies throughout the early 20th century, meaning that the chukka was effectively reborn on the battlefield as the desert boot. Technically speaking though, no definitive desert boot existed until 1949, when the C&J Clark Shoe Company in Great Britain standardized their take on the desert boot as a crepe-soled chukka with a suede upper. The desert boot enjoyed popularity as a hard-wearing but comfortable civilian boot, and advertising often played off of its military heritage. Aviator sunglasses. Next up, we've got an accessory. While goggles that protect the eyes from glare have been around for millennia, aviator sunglasses are uniquely military. This particular design was intended expressly for military functionality, with their large and convex frames designed to block the sun from all possible angles, since one bad attack of glare could be the difference between life or death in a dogfight. Soon, Hollywood actors during the golden age of menswear also began wearing sunglasses. And many prominent actors from the time had served in at least one of the world wars as well, which led to other people mimicking the style themselves while outside. The Aviator arguably hits its peak popularity during the 1980s, where Top Gun prominently featured them as something every pilot wore, and can help them see the highway to the danger zone. We'll see our ways out. The mess jacket. Believe it or not, even some of these pieces of formal wear have military origins. Mess jackets were first introduced as formal uniforms in prestigious English schools like Eton around 1800, and by the mid-19th century, they had carried over to the military, where they were less fussy and more utilitarian than tailcoats. Not to mention considerably cooler. We mean literally cooler, although they look cool too. Mess jackets were soon adopted by more militaries around the world as formal attire, and broke into the civilian world in 1931 as one of the biggest and earliest fads of the golden age of menswear. In fact, the mess jacket became a victim of its own popularity, as the owners of nightclubs and restaurants became to dress their staff like waiters or bellhops in it to appear trendy, so that by 1934, the trend fizzled as men feared being mistaken for the help. The Cummerbund. Mess jackets haven't quite survived outside of military settings, but our final item certainly has. The modern cummerbund is modeled after the waist sashes, which were originally worn by British military officers who served in more hot and humid climates like India. The traditional waistcoat that was ubiquitous at the time covered more of the body, which could cause the wearer to become overheated. Instead, soldiers opted to borrow from the sartorial customs of the places they served, and they used these sashes as a way to still have a proper waist covering, since leaving the shirt front around the waist was the equivalent of walking around in your underwear. The horror. Eventually, the literal sash was replaced with the cummerbund we know today, the pleats of which are intentionally evocative of the folds of a sash. This style caught the interest of the royal courts and the public once these soldiers returned home with this newfound style. And now the cummerbund has replaced the evening waistcoat as the preferred black tie evening covering. Classic menswear and military attire developed together, so it's no surprise that these items made their way from the battlefield into stylish gents' wardrobes. To learn more about how military fashion broadly impacted classic style, check out Preston's video on the military as the secret source of classic menswear. What's your favorite military turned menswear item story? Let us know in the comments.